see. So it sounds that producing videos, working on YouTube, consumes a lot more time than working in your studio for clients.
It seems like that, although there's like it is the other way around. I'm currently, because for some reason I think that studio work, mixing, mastering is more sustainable than YouTube. Like YouTube, you just don't know. I just don't know. They can change the algorithm tomorrow and then I'm gone. I don't think it would go that fast, but YouTube doesn't feel as stable as a mixing mastering business. So I always give more attention to clients than to YouTube. So my schedule is that I'm working on audio and mixing mastering on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and YouTube on Tuesday and Thursday. And today is an exception because today is Friday. But you know, sometimes you can shift a little bit. But that's like the balance that I try to create: 2 days of YouTube, 3 days of mixing mastering. And as a side note, YouTube goes on outside of business hours because I'm still thinking about ideas. I'm making notation, or like writing small things that I want to do in a video. Sometimes I'm doing editing. I'm sitting at home and then I'm just, you know, doing video editing or whatever. So YouTube continues outside of the studio. But the balance inside of the studio is really like 2 days and 3 days. And that balance has been working really well for me. Like it really creates that shift every day that, you know, keeps me going for some reason. If I would be doing mixing and mastering for 5 days a week, you're getting stuck in it or something. And right now it really feels fresh every day. So it's really helping both of the sides of my business as well by doing it this way.
I understand. Talking about dealing with music, there are always, let's say, three main characteristics in our situation right now. The first characteristic is being a studio engineer. The second is being a music lover. They go together, of course. And the third is being at least partly a producer of music. Which of these three characters has a relation to modular synthesis?
Wow, to modular synthesis, these three characters. So it's a studio engineer, music lover, and the last one was the...
And the last one was at least partly producer of music. So in simple words, do you have a certain relation, opinion, emotion for modular synthesis?
Actually, yes. When it comes to like if I want to explore modular synthesizers, if that's like the question is, then yes, I've always found them really interesting. I've actually attended a Super Booth a few years ago in Berlin, and it was just amazing how far it goes as well. Like modular synthesis is something that I would love to explore one day if I get time. So maybe after I'm like retired or something, I will look.
No, you won't have time after retiring, I can tell you.
Oh, okay. But you know, whenever I get, I would love to like build like a complete synthesizer wall. One of the YouTube channels that I just love watching is Look Mum No Computer. He is just like, I would love to collab with him one day. Like, I don't know how. I have no idea what that video would be, but he seems to be a super awesome person. And what he's doing with modular synthesis is just like amazing. But it's really something I would love to explore one day, like modular synthesis and creating music that way. It would be super amazing. But again, for me, it's just like, I like to focus myself. And currently it's like a focus on two things: mixing, mastering, and YouTube. And I have a feeling that I need to keep this focus for now. So But whenever I would get time, I would be high on my list to explore modular synthesis. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the time factor, of course, is
Time. It's always time. Like I would love a week to have like 9 days and a day have like 32 hours or something. That would be like
yeah,
like,
it would be possible. But then we would have a lot less months in a year.
yeah. Or I need to go back to my home planet. Maybe
All right.
days on Earth are so short. Like my home planet has way more time.
All right. Yeah, perhaps we will meet there sometime.
Yeah.
After the next kind of retirement.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your studio. You told some minutes ago it's mastering and mixing studio, so no live, is it right?
No, there's no real thought put into live recording when designing the studio. It could be possible. I do have a few tie lines with Sound Vision Studio, which is like we're sharing a building. Sound Vision Studio is the building, and I'm renting a room in there. That's the correct way of saying it. So absolutely not mine. Sound Vision Studio is like they have a huge recording room and stuff. Technically, I could tie into their lines and record there. But practically, I just rent their control room and record over there. That's just easier. So I do some recording work, but I basically just rent Sound Vision Studio for that because the facilities they have, I cannot top that in the next 10 years or something. Like it would need such a big investment. It's just better to just rent that studio.
I see.
Yeah.
Are there certain conditions a client has to meet to get your customer?
Yes, but this might sound a little bit weird or off because I don't care what music you're making. There are a few styles that I just don't feel comfortable with engineering, that I just don't feel. And I'm always very honest about that. It's better to be honest about like, hey, I'm not feeling your track than by forcing it because the end result won't be great. So that's one of the things. But I do have a very broad musical taste, like a super broad musical taste, which helps me with that. But I don't really care if a client is big or small in the music scene. Like they could be selling over 100 million on Spotify. I don't even know how it works. I've never been interested in that, in plays or views or whatever. So that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what type of music you're making, or at least as long as I'm feeling it is okay. They have to be open for a little bit of adjustment sometimes. Amateur musicians that are self-recording, most of the times when I get their tracks, I do have a few tips or a few tricks or things, and I would just want to navigate towards the best product within the possibilities that they have, and within my possibilities, of course, in what I can do and adjust. But in the end, I think that I can work with all kinds of material. What is way more important for me is respect, a mutual respect. I have huge respect for everybody that makes music because I think that a world without music is going to be a very, I wouldn't say boring, it's scary. I think it will be a very scary world. It's not a world that I would live in. So everybody that is making music, I have a huge respect for. If it's like a top artist or if it's like the guy that is playing in the city. I always call street musicians are the ones that are making the wallpaper of the city, the musical wallpaper of a city. And I have huge respect for all of them. And the only thing that I want is getting that respect back. I want to have a respectful relationship with my clients. And as long as that can be there, you can be my client. If I notice that there's some disrespect, then I pretty quickly just stop the service and stop it. I'm calling this, and this is, it maybe sounds a little bit arrogant, but it's some kind of self-protection that I'm doing. I'm calling this, I'm firing my clients. Normally, when you work for somebody, you could get fired. But why can clients just do everything? Like they always say, client is king. Maybe that's a Dutch way of saying it. But I'm saying, yeah, you can be king, but you have to be... But you also have to act as a royal. Like you have to just be no. And honestly, I've got a super good group of clients. Like the clients that I'm serving, they are all amazing people. They really do their best to work to a best end result together with me. It's always a collaboration, and it's like happening 1 or 2 times a year that I feel that I'm not being treated right. And I'm really simple with that. Like, okay, I don't feel that there's respect here. I first start up a little bit of conversation. But if I really notice that, okay, this is not going to work this way, then please look for another engineer that you do have a connection with. Because with me, this is not going to work. So this is maybe a little bit of a different answer than you was expecting. But that's really important for me. Because in the end, if there's that mutual respect, we both feel really comfortable. And when you feel comfortable, you can make music and you can make creative things. And if you don't feel comfortable, it's going to be forced and it's never going to create a good result.
Yeah, I see. Do you interfere?
I'm asking, a lot of times I'm asking if something was intentional. So sometimes I'm getting a mix for mastering and I notice that the vocal is pretty low for my taste. And I'm emailing that like, hey, from what I'm noticing here on my speakers, I think that the vocal is a little bit low in the mix. Is this how you've intended it? Or is this something that you didn't intend and you might need to fix? And from there, I'm of course getting a response like, yeah, no, we intended the vocal to be low, so keep it that way. Or I'm sometimes getting, oh, I didn't notice that. Maybe I should bump up the vocal a little bit. So sometimes it's interfering and sometimes it's just checking what I'm doing. When I want to interfere, it's always in collaboration with my client. I never just adjust something because I think it's better. It's always like, hey, I think it's better. Let's ask first, and then I can fix it for them or change it. But I always want to check things. And sometimes what happens is that I hear something and I think like, oh, that's awesome, and I'm not even asking. And it was a mistake by my client, and you get the confusion thing. Like the client emails back like, hey, something weird is going on. Didn't you notice that? And I'm like, yeah, I noticed that. I liked it, and the client's like, no, it's a mistake. It needs to be removed. And those weird things happen. But I really try to keep the music as much in the way that my client created it. I don't try to interfere that much. Only come up with ideas or something. But the important thing about my ideas is that they are just my ideas. And if a client says no, it's completely okay. It's completely fine. There's no hard feelings or something in there.
Would you go and help your clients or your customer recording their sessions?
Yes, there's actually a new service that I have. It's called Recording Guidance. And that's meant, what I've noticed is that sometimes I get like a full album to mix, and they've did like recordings for weeks. They've just built a setup and they've been recording for weeks on that album. And then I noticed simple mistakes, like for instance, microphone placement, overhead placement, or wrong setting on the microphone on the overheads, or hi-hat mic with too much spill on it, or whatever. And you cannot go in there and change that. Like you have to start the whole recording process again. Super expensive. It takes a lot of time. Not something that you want. So I've started the recording guidance service for people to come to me before they start recording. And then we just talk through the whole recording, and we talk through all their plans. And whenever they've got their recording setup done, they send me the sound check, so that I can check, like, okay, is this something that could work for me or not? And just to have that check, and just for people to be sure. So I do interfere in it, but just as a check, and just as to get that little bit of back and forth with, to be able to interfere before mistakes are being made, and so that we can fix it where the fix is needed, instead of fixing it afterwards, fix it in the mix thing. I try to avoid that. So yeah, I'm doing that, but just for the people that want that, of course. And
sure, of course.
Yeah.
You have to pay for it.
Yeah, and it's not that expensive, because in the end it makes my job easier as well. So
yeah, okay, yes, sure.
So that cost me less time. So yeah. Yeah.
Vintage. It's not a hype anymore. It's too long to be a hype. Everything is vintage, and vintage and analog. It's not the same at all, of course, but vintage has kind of magic or something like that. What's your relation to this? Do you use vintage gear only because it's vintage or something like that?
So we're going into the controversial route now, because there are a lot of opinions about this. I do have vintage gear. Yeah, I do. Let me see what's in my desk. My desk is actually pretty new. What's in here? I've got Illusia, Tegler. I do have an Altec compressor. And to my left, I do have vintage reverbs, PCM, Yamaha SPX90, and I do have a vintage Level Devil. That's from Gates. It's not a very well-known thing. My console is, of course, vintage. It's a Neumann console from the 70s. It's a broadcasting console. I do have a rack full of EQs, which are from a not very well-known brand. It's called Sait, S-A-I-T. They make satellites now, which is cool. But back in the days, they made console things, and it's like super. It's a passive EQ with a Class A amplifier stage in there. So that's super nice sounding EQs. A rack full of them, and on top of my studio, on the ceiling, or like it's a storage room, there's an EMT 140 reverb plate. So I do have a relationship with vintage, because I have some vintage gear. And what I always think about vintage gear is the reason why all those vintage things sound so good is because the units that didn't sound good have been discarded already.
I see. Yeah.
There has been a natural selection with vintage gear, which is great. Another thing that I've noticed with vintage gear is that the mentality of producing equipment was different back then. And also the specifications were different. The specifications, most of all, were based on broadcasting. Or with the Level Devil, it was based on aviation. And those specs were way higher, like we don't do that anymore, those specifications. And that's not just audio specifications, but also reliability specifications and maintenance specifications. I do know that the Tegler units that I have in here, which are, super awesome units. Best reverb I've ever had is the Roundside machine from Tegler. But if you go in there, if you open those things up, most of it is made with SMD technology, and that's already a lot more difficult to do maintenance on. Now, I don't know if those units need maintenance. Maybe they've built, I only know that when they get vintage. But when I have the Neumann console, I've recently recapped a lot of things in there, like just replaced every single capacitor. And it's pretty easy to do because it's made to do that. and schematics are being given. So there are some benefits to vintage gear. Downside is it's vintage, it's old, it can break down, and you have to be able to do the maintenance on it. Luckily, I can do a lot of maintenance myself, and I know a guy that is like very good at it. But if you don't have that skill set, then vintage can be a pain in the ass as well. So that's what I think of vintage. And I if there's a studio full of vintage gear, that wouldn't automatically mean everything that comes out of there sounds good. Same goes with the other way around. If a studio only has a digital equipment, like really going, like cutting out the analog, like going complete opposite, also doesn't mean that everything sounds bad coming out of there. Like,
yeah, of course, that's true. Mm-hmm. It's a quite, let's say, quite rational, intellectual approach to the matter of vintage.
Yeah.
I have to admit, my relation is more a magical one, perhaps. Thinking at my younger days.
Oh, that's good. Emotional connection. What I do always think when something is vintage, I always think about, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking like, what type of stories does this piece has to tell me?
Yes.
You know, like a little bit of rust or paint chips missing. It's like the thing has been through a few things, and that creates a certain emotion, a certain feel. That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
How far away do you feel yourself from being a composer or musicologist?
Ooh. Both far away and pretty close to. If you look at it from a global perspective, I'm pretty close to it because I'm working in music. But if you look at it from where I'm sitting and from my job perspective, I'm pretty far from it because I always think that is their job. So I can give some input. If I'm really thinking something, I can give some input. Not too much, of course, because it's their job. It's not my job. So I try to separate like what is my job and what is not my job. In that case, I'm pretty far from it actually. And I don't mind it. I really enjoy listening to what people came up with. Every single time I'm getting a new track in the studio, I just enjoy like the creative things that they've discovered and their signature. Every single artist has one because it's basically their soul, their emotion that they are translating into their music. So I enjoy being in that position a lot.
I see. Okay. All right. Is there anything you would like my audience, which is mainly not the broad audience, but our members? Okay, about 3,500 is not that few, but it's not your 140,000 people.
Yeah.
Yours.
I can't believe it either. So
yeah, it's great.
But you'll be there one day as well. Like that's how YouTube works. It's just
maybe.
Yeah, if you keep going, and that's not just with YouTube, but I think everything is based on just keeping going. As soon as you quit is when you lose. Like you're not losing until you quit.
But okay, I have to say I'm more focusing on developing our community. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but like that can also be a goal.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But okay, Anyway, would you like to tell, let's say, our members, it's not my members, I don't own them, our members something what we have not talked about so far?
So we've already talked about a lot of things. Don't... I've got something. Don't trust advertisements.
Yes.
Just never trust the texts and advertisements that developers make, most of all software developers, because sometimes it's true, most of the times it's not true. That's just always stay critical. Always stay critical at things, and always form your own opinion about a piece of gear, a piece of software, or whatever. And be honest, even if it should be a super high class piece of equipment or a piece of software, if you don't like it, there's no obligation to use it or even buy it. I think that's a very important thing to know. And if there's a piece of equipment that everybody hates, but you like the sound of it, use it. That's basically, that's
important.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Wytse, thanks for your time and our talk. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I'm sure our members will enjoy them also. I'm not so sure when I'm going to publish it. You will see my cut, of course, at first, but I think rather at the beginning of next month than at the end of this month. But okay, I will let you know, and I'll send you, after getting your material, I'll do the cut, and I'll send you my cut then for approval. Okay, awesome. So what is your weekend looking like?